Hey guys, what's going on? It's Joseph from THC Podcast, the Heretic Chronicles. Um, Today I'm going to be speaking with a good pal of mine, Raf, or better known as Elusive2.0 on Instagram and YouTube. He's a content creator. He breaks down clips of combat sports and uploads them to Instagram, YouTube. I mean, easily one of the most underrated channels out there. Everything that he does on there, man, is just the poise you have when you make these videos. It's unmatched. They're
I appreciate it.
they're calculated, they're thoughtful, and they're precise, accurate. I learn a lot from them, to be honest, when I watch your videos, and I'm sure other people do as well. Um, I can't imagine the amount of time you spend editing the videos, but with that being said, man, I'm happy to have you here.
Likewise, Joseph. It's a pleasure for me. It's a pleasure for me to be on, and the first of many. We'll definitely be doing this a hell of a lot more.
Yes, sir. That's wonderful to hear. Man, I want to jump right into it. How old are you when you fell in love with combat sports, and why?
That is a brilliant question. I was 14 years old when I first fell in love with combat sports. The fight that
Okay.
sold me was David Haye versus Vladimir Klitschko. In the UK specifically, that was a big thing at the time in the sense that David Haye was the up and coming celebrity boxer, so to speak, or superstar looming. And there was a big celebrity feel to the boxing side of that. He was training with Justin Bieber, Rita Ora, and the whole of the UK got swept into that at the time. So I'd say 2011 was a specific year ahead of the Klitschko fight, around about 2010. The start of that decade was specifically when I got into it for sure.
That's awesome, man. That's cool, man. The Klitschko is definitely a legend, and yeah, man, I was just curious when you, like I said, fell in love with combat sports. You know how old you were and stuff like that. I want to
Yeah,
ask you a question. I want to put you on the hot seat, man. I
go
know you
for it.
cover both. I know you cover both, but what holds a dear place in your heart a little bit more, boxing or MMA?
Honestly, I love them both to pieces. I
Mm,
love them both to pieces. For
yeah,
me, I think that they're different but similar. They're similar in that they're in the same business competition. If you look at the market parameters and the fact that they compete for the same fan base, the same customers that they both are. If you look at the lifeblood of the sport, it's built on casual fans. And MMA and boxing both compete for that same pool of customers. Um, in terms of personal preference, I love the stand up element of boxing. I think that's a lot
yeah.
more precise and concise. With regards to all round action, I think that's where the UFC does it. So I think they're beautiful in different respects, but I couldn't split them in terms of my love for each personally.
That's cool, man. I just wanted to get your take on that, and I was like 100% sure you were an answer just like that, but I wanted to ask anyway. Just was
I was
curious.
that predictable.
No, I just feel like since you're from Europe, I feel like you guys kind of got into stand-up fighting a little bit more than, let's say, Americans, right? You know, kind of have a little blend of
Yeah.
everything. It's a melting pot over here, but that kind of leads into the next question. Where did you grow up, and what was like the most popular fighting discipline?
Sure. So I grew up in the UK, born and raised my whole life. And the most popular fighting discipline here is boxing, and it has been.
Mm,
And
of course, yeah.
it's funny that because it's historically embedded in the sense that there are decades and decades upon decades of folklore with the likes of Nigel Benn, Chris Eubank, Lennox Lewis, and now more recently Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury.
Mm,
With the UFC, as is the case with the sport as a conglomerate across the globe, it's a lot newer. MMA is a newer sport.
it
Um,
is definitely
and
newer.
so, yeah, there's less history behind it in the UK. And so, I mean, a good example I'll give you is the fact that a big boxing fight is front and back page news in the UK, whereas a big MMA fight is buried about 10, 15 pages deep into the paper. And in terms of mainstream media coverage in the UK, for us, it's Sky, BT, BBC, ITV. Those are the main four.
Yep.
And they shed significantly more coverage on boxing than MMA. Excuse me. And I think that's quite indicative of where the sports are in the UK.
Mm,
Although I would say the tide is turning.
it is.
British
I'd say
boxing is
so.
very hot, but there is a growing dissatisfaction, particularly amongst people from my generation and below. So late 20s and under the 30 under 30 category. Um, Boxing is still the front runner across the whole of the UK, but in that under 30 age category, with university students now particular, UFC probably has overtaken. I know it has for sure in the US. Under 30s, the numbers are quite wide apart in that demographic, but in the UK specifically, it's getting closer. Boxing is still in the driving seat, but the gap is bridging at quite a pace.
Yeah, man, like you said, the youth is, like you said, kind of seems like they're leaning more towards MMA and whatnot, especially with the emergence of the UFC. But yeah, man, boxing is still legendary. But as long as both of them are succeeding and thriving, that's what's best for, I'd say, like all combat sports fans.
Yeah.
We also wanted to ask, who was your favorite boxer growing up, and who's your favorite boxer currently?
Uh, that's a brilliant question. Who's my favorite boxer growing up? I used to have, as I'm sure all teenage boys do at some stage in their lives, whether they admit it or not, I used to have a big man crush on David Hay, which goes back to the answer I gave you at the start. I had a
uh,
big man crush on him, and
yeah.
I used to follow him a hell of a lot back in the day, around about 7, 8 years ago in particular. But from around about 2017, 18 onwards, I actually completely detached myself from individual sports and sports teams because I saw a lot of bias and I wanted, I've always been a seeker of the truth in a more philosophical sense. And that
Yes,
goes beyond combat sport,
it
just in life
does.
generally.
Yes, yes.
And, you have to take away your confirmation bias. Like, for example, it's okay to have an opinion. I'll give you an example of politics. It's okay to be left wing. It's okay to be right wing. It's okay to be central.
Yeah, this
It's
is who
just
we
when
are.
you go too far left or too far right, that's where things get unhealthy. And
Yep.
so, wherever you are in that sort of middle, so long as there is some sort of correlation either way towards the middle, I think that's a good place to be. But going back to your question, in terms of sport, that's what I look to do. I always look to see what a fighter does well, what they don't do. And some people ask, does that take the enjoyment out of it? For me, I actually get more satisfaction out of analyzing fights than just watching and scoring. So I don't know, maybe I'm just a massive nerd, who knows? But for me personally, that's what makes me tick. And so in that regard, I would say that I haven't really had a favorite fight or even a sports team. Well, growing up in my youth, I was saying youth like I'm a granddad. Growing up in my teenage years,
Yeah.
my childhood years, I was a massive Chelsea FC fan. I stopped supporting.
Okay.
I was a massive Juventus fan. I stopped supporting. Um, and I saw sport completely differently around about 6 years ago. And
Now we're
here we
taking it
are, Joseph.
home.
Sorry?
I said we're taking it home. That's
Yeah.
I don't even
God.
mean to even. Oh my goodness, that's
No,
every.
it's all
It
good.
seems like. Oh my goodness, the English fans are probably heartbroken right now. Even a week from the last game or whatever last weekend sucks.
They are.
Don't worry, they'll get back on track.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, man. Um, what's your opinion on, actually I want to go back to the last thing. Remember you were saying about the left and the right and always being in the middle? I want
Yes.
everyone to know the truth always lies somewhere in the middle, like you said.
Correct.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, man, what's your opinion on the current status of, or the heavyweight division in boxing? Like, you got Fury, you got Usyk. Like, what's your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I think that we're at a stage, ironically, Joseph, where we were last summer. Last summer being 2021, where we have all of the belts around two waists, in different capacities, 3-on-1, one on the other. This time it's Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk. Last year it was Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. We have a chance now to make that undisputed fight, although that does boxing is always only as strong as its heavyweight division. I think the same could be said in the UFC to a degree. When the boxing heavyweight division is strong, the sport is strong. More eyeballs are on the sport. And that's the biggest fight that needs to be made in terms of historical significance. The undisputed fight, regardless of the participants, whether it be any permutation, Joseph, of Deontay Wilder, AJ, Joe Joyce, Usyk, Fury, whoever it is, that's the fight that needs to happen. And what we're now seeing is a waning interest in the heavyweight division, which is worrying because, like I said, that's where the interest in the sport is predicated on largely. The heavyweight division is the sexy division. It's the seductive one.
Yeah,
that's the one that turns the most eyeballs. And so when that's in a position where it doesn't quite have the sex appeal of yesterday, that's where I begin to worry. That's where I begin to think this undisputed fight needs to happen, because delaying ultimately brings on the inevitable, where the belts are fragmented. And we're now in a position where mandatories are being ordered. We saw that with Daniel Dubois for the WBA. And I know Frank Warren said that the Fury fight would take precedent over that. But the principle of the fact that Joshua and Hrgovic are potentially in line for the IBF title, if Usyk is stripped of his belt, we've got all of these belts. We've got them around two waists. Now is the time to capitalize. Strike while the
iron's hot.
Iron rod is hot. Yeah, the iron rod is hot. Because momentum isn't there forever, and also we grossly underestimate customer fatigue in boxing. We really do. We grossly underestimate that. We assume that the demand for a fight will be the same as it is currently now, 5 years from now. Now, in some cases, that's true. Mayweather Pacquiao, they managed to squeeze every drop of money they could out of that. Absolutely. Yeah. But Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury, for example, isn't a fight that captivates global interest outside of the UK, Nigeria, and portions of the Middle East. It's not a fight that the world will tune into. I know America aren't particularly interested in it. And I mean, I probably would flip that question on to you in a second, in the sense that from how I see it here, and from having spoken to my friends across the pond, there isn't really much of an appetite for a Joshua Fury fight. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I'll go off real quick on someone that I really still have faith in, but had kind of let me down a little bit. And I don't even mean to say that about a professional fighter, because, who am I? But Dillian White. I mean, this guy went through the ringer, waiting 1,000 days for his shot. The Oscar Rivas controversy, the drug test, the whole entire thing. For him to show up to the Fury fight and look kind of flat like that, I mean, I was really sad for White, man, because I know the type of wars he's been in. I really feel like he could have gave Fury an awesome fight. I like White so much, man. I'll ride on. I love Dillian White. He's an awesome boxer. Yeah, man, he got stopped brutally. And the Jermaine Franklin fight, I think the guy's name was, a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. That was a war, but I kind of thought the judging was a little suspect in that, just like the UFC this past weekend. We'll get into all that, but yeah, man, judging is a real problem. But back to your question, Joshua Fury. I mean, I can't believe Fury was just saying 2 months ago, oh, Joshua better accept the fight no later than December the 9th or something like that. And I mean, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, obviously, but that fight would still do numbers if it came to fruition. But yeah, I think the ship has sailed for that fight. you could still do it, and you can, just like how you could still do Deontay Wilder versus Joshua. I mean, I've seen
Yeah,
so many of your videos, your breakdowns on it. I mean, dude, that would be a cracker fight. That would be awesome. That would be awesome.
definitely.
Awesome fight right there, man.
I
Oh,
agree with
okay. Yeah, I'll let you
100%.
speak. Sorry. I'll let you speak.
No, no worries. I was going to agree with what you said in the sense that Joshua Wilder is a huge fight over
It
here, this
is.
side of the pond as well. Um, but it's not. I'll give you an analogy. If you break a vase on the floor, Joseph, and you put sellotape around it and super glue it back together, it may be functionable, but does it ever still have that same element of intrigue it did
Yeah.
before?
Yeah,
No.
you're right. No, it doesn't. No, it
And
does
I don't
not.
think that's exclusive to Joshua Wilder, but once guys who they had an aura of invincibility on the come up in the sense that both were unbeaten, both were wrecking balls. And fast forward 36 months from 2019 when Ruiz beat Joshua at MSG, Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder have now lost 5 fights between them in the
Yeah,
space of 3 years. So on average, they're losing between them 2 fights a year.
you're
And
right.
every time you do that, it's like putting an axe in a tree. If you keep chopping and chopping at a tree, inevitably, it's not going to be as tall and it will fall down. So I think that's essentially what's happened here with the fight value of Joshua Wilder. Although, with that said, um, still a massive appetite for it. Still a massive appetite for it. And I expected to do 7 figures on pay per view, but not 2 million. Once upon a time, this was a fight that could have potentially done 2.5 to 3 million pay per view buys in the UK. Not anymore. I don't even think 2 million is the ceiling. I don't see the fight doing 2 million buys at all. 1.5 in all likelihood being the upper limit, but the lower limit probably being 7 figures. Because now there are extra variables in the sense that Sky Sports and Eddie Hearn have gone separate ways. And in the UK for us, Sky Sports are the main plug socket, if you like, for engaging the casual fans in boxing. They've got the big loudspeaker essentially to the masses. And since that deal went with Matchroom and Sky, we've seen this year that Matchroom have sold out one event in the entire calendar year, and uh, that being it was Fight of the Year. Sorry, my brain's gone
Are you talking about the
foggy.
Katie Taylor fight, maybe?
Lee Conlon, Michael Wood. That's it.
Okay.
Lee
Oh
Conlon, yeah,
man. Okay, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, that was Fight of the Year. But yeah, Matchroom have sold one fight this year, sold out one fight in the UK, and without Joshua having Sky behind them, I think that will handicap any fight going forward involving non-Sky fighters, as we've seen this weekend. Sorry, not this weekend. A few weekends ago, with Tyson Fury and Derek Chisora, that had very little mainstream promotion, and it did below 300,000 pay-per-view buys. So there always tends to be some sort of correlation between pay-per-view buys, ticket sales, and the hype delivered in mainstream media. Given that initially the ticket sales actually sold out in the end for the stadium, or very close to at least, but given that the buzz going in was quite low, equally that had a relationship then with the low pay-per-view buys. Um, so that's where we are on that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, like you said, man. I seen a change in the last couple of years in the boxing scene, especially over there in the UK, with, like you said, Matchroom, Sky Sports, the whole thing. I used to remember watching the Adam Smith call the fights for
Yes.
Sky Sports. I think he has the best voice. I wouldn't want anyone else commentating a fight besides him. I think he has the best, and all across all combat sports. I love him a lot, and I feel like I haven't heard him or seen him in a couple years. And I don't know if that's because I just, yeah, man, I don't know why. I remember when the heavyweight boxing, especially over there, like the Chisora fights, the White fights, they would be a lot. Sky Sports, Adam Smith. I forgot the other gentleman's name that commentate. I think it's
Johnny
no.
Nelson?
Yes, there we go. Okay, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, I haven't heard them in a while, man. So now you're stuck with the DAZN commentators. You're stuck with, some of the Matchroom guys, and they're still good, but I don't think anyone comes close to Adam Smith, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
I want to ask you, man, give me your top five fights for 2023 that you want to see in across all combat sports.
In order?
Sure.
In order.
Or off the top of your head, man. But yeah,
Yeah.
whatever you want.
Across all combat sports, thanks for the flexibility, by the way. Normally
Yeah.
it has to be a boxing or a UFC for that type of question. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I'm gonna go for Errol Spence, Terence Crawford, numero uno. Has to be
Okay.
number one.
Okay, that's
Um,
interesting. That's
I
interesting. Okay.
I think that's got all the makings of a classic in the sense that it satisfies a lot of the criteria. If you had a checklist of criteria for what you'd want that would constitute an all-time great fight, two unbeaten fighters, Orthodox versus Southpaw, both in the pound for pound top five, for the undisputed and the top two in their division. Outside of potentially the two of them being heavyweights, I don't know what's missing in terms of ingredients. If you had to make a dream fight, opposite stances, to both of them are in the top five pound for pound, the top two in their division, and it's for all the marbles in their division. I think it's got all the ingredients for an all-time classic, and I think it's the best fight that can be made. Um, Number two, for the intrigue, I'd say Francis Ngannou versus John Jones
There you
at
go. Okay.
heavyweight in the UFC.
Okay, there
I
you go.
think that with John coming off such a long layoff, no one knows how he's going to look like. And I think that because there hasn't been that cushioning, so to speak, in the form of a Tai Tuivasa or someone where he can just be massaged into the heavyweight division slowly with, this would be straight into the deep end, all or nothing, back against the wall. And given that Jones arguably lost his last fight against Dominic Reyes, there's a lot of intrigue around that. So that would be number two, Francis Ngannou, John Jones. Number three would be Artur Beterbiev, Dmitry Bivol. I
Okay.
think that is an absolutely incredible fight. And again, in terms of satisfying criteria, both of them are the top two in their division. They just so happen to also be in the top 10 pound for pound. For myself, anyway, I put Bivol and Beterbiev in my top 10. And it's interesting because fights like that often get billed, Joseph, as speed versus power. And I don't quite think
Mm,
that does it justice because Dmitry Bivol has enough power to command people's respect, as we
yeah.
saw with Canelo. Canelo didn't walk him down. We've
No.
seen Canelo walk down Caleb Plant, Callum Smith, even Gennady Golovkin to an extent,
Yep.
but he
You're
didn't
right.
walk down Dmitry Bivol. Um, and so Bivol isn't just a case of IQ and speed. There is pop there as well. Um, Now, for Beterbiev, again, I think it does him an injustice the opposite way around. Because if you look at the openings that he maneuvered on Joe Smith Jr., he was punching a lot around the side of the guard, but just controlling him and pushing him off in the clinch. Because in the clinch, you have to be busier. You have to be busier because that's the nature of the proximity between
Yeah.
you and the other person. Um, and he manages that very well. And I think that stylistically, that would be incredible because it's superpower with high level boxing IQ against super IQ with commendable power. It's a real mix of traits. It's not speed versus power at all.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Bivol's like a little bit more on the volume side. Butterbeef
yes.
is more, if I said his last name correctly, he's like you said, a little bit more with the power shots and whatnot. He packs punch for sure.
Yeah.
100% finish rating, I think. Savage.
Correct, 100%, 100% KO ratio. The same as
Savage.
Crawford, ironically, and that's the number one fight. So those three there. In terms of other fights that could be made, I would love to see Hamzat against Kamaru Usman. I think
Okay.
that
All right.
Usman is going to beat Leon Edwards, and I appreciate that my fellow Brits hearing this won't want to hear that, but I do think he's
Yeah,
going to
they
win
ain't
this
gonna like that.
trilogy.
They ain't
I
gonna like it.
no, they're not going to like that, unfortunately. But I think Kamaru will get this done in the trilogy, and then it would be a sort of passing of the torch potentially because Khamzat is billed as this next big thing, and potentially the new face of MMA going forward. If you look at the traction he commands, and in all likelihood the power, the pound for pound ability to go with that potential wise, um, Khamzat versus Kamaru is definitely my number four. And number five, I would probably say we just had Islam against Charles Oliveira, which I thought was incredible. I'd
Awesome.
be Yeah, I kind of feel number five would have to be from that pool. Um, Number five, fights that I'd like to see. Because of the history and the backstory to it, I'm going to go for Islam Makhachev against Conor McGregor. The idea, the idea,
Oh,
the idea of Khabib in the opposite end to Conor McGregor as trainer, and us being able to relive that ordeal, that narrative. I think that it would just be, I think, just for the dynamics surrounding that, essentially, Habib would be using Islam like a video game character, the same way he did
yeah.
against Charles Oliveira. He'd be using someone who had significantly better stand up ability this time round with the wrestling threat. So, Conor McGregor versus Islam, I think that with Habib in the opposite corner as well, I think the chance to relive that as a substitute for never being able to see
The
Khabib against
rematch.
McGregor, I think those two together, I think it's probably the highest selling fight you could make right now in the UFC. Could you name a pairing?
Of the top five, or are you saying another fight that would
Any
sell like?
fight in UFC right now with active fighters that you believe does more buys than Islam against Connor?
I think Connor versus you'd have to throw Connor in there. Oh man.
It's a
hmm.
tough one
Yeah, I don't know. I
because
mean, we all
Usman's
know
lost now.
Connor Nate 3, especially with like the new age fans.
Yeah,
If you were to stack that card, I mean,
yeah,
that that could do it. But I mean, it's Nate's not with the company anymore, so I don't know how you would really do that unless it was like a one fight deal. But that would
yeah,
be something that would be high pay per views. Anything with Connor in it, and it's funny that we're talking about Connor because that literally led into I got two more questions. Led into the next
yeah.
question. Who should he fight in the comeback?
Right. I'm skeptical as to whether he returns at 155 or not.
Yeah, he's
Um,
certainly not. We everyone out there just forget about 155. I see a lot of comments just like
yeah,
literally forget about lightweight 155. It's just never happening again. He's just gonna fight at one. Let me tell you the layout. If the rumors are true, the Usman needs hand surgery. If they do Masvidal Leon Edwards, and then if Masvidal somehow wins, you're saying that the UFC is not going to try to put together McGregor versus Masvidal for the 170-pound title?
I think that it's in terms of the biggest celebrity fights that are there, it would that's definitely something on the cards. But I still think because of the backstory with Khabib,
Yeah, of course.
even though
Yeah,
Jorge, I think that's what will do it ultimately because Jorge is incredible in terms of the traction he commands, but he's that there's a waning influence of his brand, particularly following that second loss to Kamaru, the knockout. Since then, and then the Colby loss, the 5-0 straight bashing.
yeah,
I think that his brand is significantly damaged, but he still remains a
of
big
course.
draw. I think Jorge against Conor does very high numbers, but the backstory of Khabib using Islam like a video game character and this next generation potentially having the baton passed to them like on a sports day or something, that is the idea of selling that to the public. That is, I'll give you a phrase here, Joseph. That's casual fan candy.
Yeah, it is.
That is casual fan candy with like caramel dressing over the top and everything you can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, Connor coming back and fighting, let's say Chandler would be absolute crazy. If Chandler would have won the Poirier fight a couple of weeks ago, we would be running with that narrative a little bit more. But since he didn't win, that's still the front runner. But we would be
Yes,
pressing the narrative like 100 times more. Trust me, if Chandler would have pulled out the W with that. But yeah, Connor
definitely.
Chandler, Connor Poirier 4. Even though that sounds a bit, but at 170. I don't. And if
Yeah.
they throw Poirier a lot of money, that's a good fight. I mean, Connor Masvidal, like I said, depending on what angle you want to go with that, Connor Nate, the trilogy fight. Yeah, man. I think all those fights I just named off, Connor, Tony Ferguson, even though Tony unfortunately is
Yeah.
on a losing streak, sadly, he can still pull. He could still. They could still do that fight later down the line if they want to. I think.
You a Tony fan?
I think everyone was, and then after the
Yeah.
Gaethje fight, after the world stopped moving and we're in our houses and we're watching Tony get battered,
Yeah.
I think he should have retired probably after that. You know, but I listen. Tony's gonna come back and probably fight another, let's say, 3, 4 more times. Hopefully, he gets a couple wins, gets the McGregor fight, and ends it off on that note. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be the fairy tale ending. I think that he is holding out for the McGregor fight, and if you look at the business model being recycled, the UFC Cowboy was on a losing streak to Tony, ironically, and Justin Gaethje prior to when he fought Conor McGregor, and I can't help but feel that that recycling concept of bringing Conor back into the fold after a long layoff, um, in 2018 when he lost to Khabib and then faced Cowboy straight after, sorry, not straight after, afterwards in 2020, 2 years had elapsed, and it was a soft entry back into the swing of things. I
Yeah,
see something similar here in the sense that serious injury against Dustin Poirier, um, and it's a soft entry back into the bigger, wider periphery. But there is one thing I would say, Joseph, and I don't want to hijack this and take this in a different direction, but on the topic of Conor and returning, are you aware of the USADA situation?
yeah, of course. Yes, I'm totally aware of what's going on. I've been
Yeah.
keeping
It's
up
an
on it.
interesting loophole, isn't it? In the sense that if a fighter is quote unquote retired, they're removed from the UFC rankings, and by virtue of that, then they're removed from USADA testing. And so, if someone like even a TJ Dillashaw or a Conor McGregor or someone with a long term injury needs HGH or stem cells or whatever variation of PED potentially may be at play, if you're on paper retired and out of the drug testing pool, you're not ranked. You have license to do what you want. And so, in terms of speeding up recoveries, that's something that could be in play potentially for Conor McGregor and TJ Dillashaw. Um, it's a bit of a loophole when you think about it. Just to announce your retirement, say you're retired from the sport, and then you're out of the ranking system, no drug testing, and you can rehabilitate yourself potentially um, significantly faster than you would do naturally. Um, so it's an interesting loophole. But sorry, I don't want to hijack your
No,
questions.
man,
It's an
and
interesting
no,
loophole, though.
it's perfectly fine. I mean, I think we essentially really covered everything, man. I was just curious on your thoughts about everything. I've been thinking we've been talking for almost about 40 minutes now. I'll have to go check. I don't have the exact timestamp with me, but yeah, man. I
No
mean,
worries.
I think we talked about a fair array of topics. Um, yeah, man. Give us some thoughtful insight before we head out of here. Give us fans
No, of course.
some wisdom.
Some words of wisdom. God, on a Saturday night. What
Yeah.
words of wisdom can I muster on a Saturday night? The end of the year coming, 2023. Um, I think that not just within combat sport as a sphere, but outside of that, now's a very good time to reflect on the year, given that the weather's getting colder as well. Everyone's inside a lot more than they otherwise would be. A good time to reflect on this year, what went well, what didn't, what you learned, what hurt, what went well, what you look to build on, and really just a period of introspection over the next few weeks before the new year, to think about what you can do going forward in your life, whatever you do, in a professional capacity, in your personal life, whatever that may be. Just draw on the experiences of this year so that you can hit the ground running in January. That's what I'd say. Perhaps a little bit too philosophical for a Saturday
No,
night,
no,
but
man. No,
you gave me license to write, so
I could talk to you to the cows rise, man. Seriously.
thank you, man.
Yeah, man. You're a very insightful guy. You're
I
just
appreciate
so,
that.
like I said, methodical, and you have so much poise when you make these videos, man. I hope everyone goes and if they're not following you, give you a follow already, man. And yeah, man. It was a pleasure talking with you.
And likewise, Joseph, the pleasure was also mine to come on. This is my first across the pond. So it was a new experience for me as well. And I'm really grateful for you having me as well. This is very much a two-way thing.
Yes, sir.